Hi, everyone. I hope you are all well. Thank you for being here today. I'm Lorena Hakak, and with Ana Luisa de Holanda Barbosa, we are going to be the chairs of this session. Today, we are pleased to welcome Margaux Suteau. She will present her paper, Inheritance, Rights, and Women's Empowerment in the Labor and Marriage Markets. Shall we get to know our guest better? Margaux is a third-year PhD student in economics in CY, Cergy Paris Université, and ESSEC Business School. She's interested in gender economics, especially regarding labor force participation and the education outcomes. This work that she's presenting today is part of her thesis, and her second project addresses the impact of early exposure to ICT on the underrepresentation of women in computer science fields. Hi, Margaux.
Hi. So I can start sharing my slides?
Yes, thank you so much for being here.
Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending this this presentation, and thank you to the organizer of the webinar for including my paper in today's session. So as Lorena says, my work is called Inheritance Rates and Women's Empowerment in the Labor and Marriage Market in India. It's part of my thesis, and it's still very much of a work in progress. So do not hesitate if you have comments and suggestions, either at the end or again, I don't mind being interrupted for clarification question. Please do not hesitate. So the motivation of this paper is the fact that in the literature, it's been made clear that land rights given to women are a pathway out of poverty and an effective empowerment tool. However, in the context of India, women are mainly excluded from land rights. So between 3 to 15% of women own land themselves. It depends on the types of survey that have been made and the regions. Other trends of inequalities have been observed. For instance, the stagnating female labor force participation in recent decades. And these persistent differences reinforce each other. So the lack of access to ownership of these assets leads to fewer opportunity on the labor market. And itself, it increased discrimination regarding access to inputs and economic securities. So the big question, if I can say, of this paper is to understand how we can break the vicious circle, and whether granting some form of land rights in the law can help these women or increase their economic outcome. And more specifically, this paper focuses on the effect of a change in women's inheritance rights on other forms of economic outcomes, such as education or labor force participation. And to do so, I exploit an exogenous change in the inheritance rights of women in India, which are the amendments of the 1956 Hindu Succession Act, which opens the possibility for women to obtain land rights. I use a difference in difference methodology with states of residence and age at the time of the amendments to identify who are the treated women, the women who benefited from the change in the law. And I will also use the triple difference in difference methodology or strategy with ownership of land in the family to really try to identify precisely women that benefited from the change. The contribution to this paper is twofold. So I used the work of Roy 2015, who emphasized that following the amendments, parents tended to act strategically to avoid giving their daughters their share of the inheritance, but gave them alternative form of transfers, such as education or dowry. So I cannot look myself whether the woman actually had the land, okay, if she inherited from it. So I used the work of Roy, who said that they didn't because parents didn't want to give it to their daughters, but instead compensated them with, for instance, education or dowry. And the first thing that I do is I look first at education, and my findings confirm the literature. I showed that following the amendments, women increased their education by a year. And then what I address here is why would parents choose to compensate their daughters with education, and what can be the side effect of such a reform besides education. The first thing that we can think about, looking at the traditional link between education and labor force participation, is that parents chose to send their daughters to school longer in order to give them more opportunities on the labor market. However, here I do not find any effect on labor force participation, except for a small part of the population, which are women that might be already in the labor market, in the formal labor market, which are not a large number of women. And so I don't have a major effect on labor force participation. Therefore, my hypothesis is that parents chose to compensate women with education, not for labor force participation, not for labor force opportunities, but for marriage market reasons. And indeed, here I do have marriage market effects following the amendments. I have a main effect on aged marriage. This is going to be the main result that we will discuss. And I found that following the amendments, the aged marriage decreased for everyone, but for women coming from blended households, aged marriage, I mean, this effect was counter, and actually they married a little bit later than their counterparts in the treated group. And I have other marriage market effects. I will talk about it. And so my conclusion of the conclusion of my work and what it contributes to the understanding of the effect of such change in inheritance rights and the access to land rights is that social norms, and especially norms regarding marriage, can have unexpected effects in terms of outcome of such reform, preventing women from actually inheriting the land, but having important effect on the marriage market.
Margaux,
yes.
Sorry. Can I ask you some? Why do you think? Why did parents avoid to give their daughters the share of the inheritance?
So what has been the main reason that has been described in the literature is because in India the daughters go live with the husband's parents. So the son stays and live with the parents and takes care of them when they're older, and the daughters go and live with the husband's parents. So giving them the family land, giving the daughters the family land, would mean that actually the husband's family would have maybe a greater more control over this land, which is in India, most of the land is inherited, so it's very important in the family. So that's the reason that Roy, her paper gives to why the parents acted so strategically, and I think there is also probably some discrimination against women working. Having the property over the land, but her main argument is actually what we call the patrie locality, the fact that actually daughters will live with her husband's family and maybe live far away from the land, etc. So going a little bit deeper into this reform before going to the details of the results. So in 1956, the government of India passed the Hindu Succession Act, which allowed women to inherit from their father's property, but not all property, only the separate property. Indeed, in India, there are two types of property: the separate property, which is everything that has been self-acquired by an individual, and the joint property, which is also called the ancestor's property and is inherited from previous generation through what's called the co-partnership system. The co-partnership system, it's like a club of all, so it used to be all male family members that shares so this ancestor's property. And in this ancestor's property, what we find mainly is the land and dwellings. So that's why having access to this joint property is really important if we want to give land rights. Therefore, between 1976 and 1994, 5 states in India decided to amend the HESA to grant daughters the share of the joint property of the family as well. And in 2005, the government of India extended the amendments to all states of India through the Hindu Succession Amendment Act. And I will also use this national reform in the robustness check section. We will talk about it later. So here on the map, you can see the 5 states that amended the HESA, as well as the dates. So a little bit more about the literature before going into my results. I'm not the first paper to analyze the effect of the amendments of the HESA. As I already mentioned, the work of Roy 2015 showed that women were not more likely to actually inherit from the land following the amendments of the HESA, but she finds an increase in education and downward. East and Tan 2020 find an increase in the labor force participation and increase in intra-household bargaining power. So here my results are not totally contradicting their work, and I will explain you that the difference between our results and especially the new mechanism that I will explain on why their effect is true, but not for everyone. I mean, that's what I found in short. The work of Boss and Das 2017 will also find an increase of education, but that this effect does not carry on to the next generation. So daughters of women that were affected by the amendments of the HESA are not more educated than the control group. Deininger and Al 2013 also find an increase of education and they find effects on aged marriage, which I will also discuss in the result section. And for them, they find an increase in the likelihood to actually obtain the land. But the reason why they find this effect is discussed by Roy 2015 and is countered by her article. So I will keep the conclusion of Roy here for my own work. And finally, Balotra, Roy, and Brulé 2018 find that following the amendments, they observe a higher female foeticide, higher fertility, and higher infant mortality. And their conclusion is that social norms lead the amendments to increase the cost of having daughters, leading to such negative effects. So now about the data identification strategy and methodology. So I'm using the Indian Human Development Survey 2011-2012 round of interview, and this is the most recent survey used in this issue. And this will allow me to have more long-term effect for the outcome I analyze. This is a nationally representative survey, interviewing more than 41,000 households. And I restrict this sample to women aged between 15 and 49 ever married, to Hindu, Sikh, Jain, and Buddhist women, because in India, laws do not necessarily apply to all religious groups. And indeed, the HSA and its amendments only apply to those 4 religious groups, which are actually a large majority of my sample anyway. And the other religious group will be used as a placebo test in the robustness section. I also restrict my sample to the 16 main states of India for homogeneity concerns, and I have a sample of more than 28,000 individuals. About the outcome, I use education. For education, I use the number of schooling years. For labor force participation, I use mainly the numbers of day work the previous year, and this is the finding I will show you today, but I actually used in my work another variable, which is a dummy equal to 1 if the woman is actually working or not. And why? Because as I said in the introduction, not many women are in the labor force in India, and hence having this binary effect could have shown some different effect, but yeah, I'm not showing it here because it's basically the same results. So to keep it simple, I just show you the number of days worked the previous year. And I also use age at marriage. So that's my main outcomes. About the identification strategy, so just as again Roy 2015, I used the fact that women between 0 and 10 years old at the time of the amendments were young enough for parents to make decisions according to them. So just like in our work, I have 3 most treated cohorts: women who were between 0 to 5 years old at the time of the amendments, women who were between 6 to 10. And because I have a more recent sample survey, as I said earlier, I can have this cohort of women born after the amendments, again, for the long-term effect. I also have 2 partially treated cohorts, women who are between 11 and 15 and 16 and 20. These are women that were closer to marriage age. They were probably, for some of them, out of school. So it gives another effect, but it's not supposed to be the most treated women. In the control group, I have women who were too old at the time of the amendments to be affected, and women living in non-amended states. So in addition, I interact the treated cohort of age with land, because as I said, in the joint property, the main asset is land. So household owning lands are more likely to be affected than the other. So about the methodology, this is quite a classical methodology. So YI is the outcome. I have a state and a year of birth fixed effect in all regression. The D post-ref, D1, D2, D3, D4 are the cohort of age, and I interact them, as you can see, with a domain equal to 1 if the family owns land. I have a set of individual and household characteristics. For instance, whether the family lives in a rural or urban areas, the income of the family, the education of the fathers, etc. And because this is a difference in difference methodology, I need to check whether the parallel trend assumption holds. Basically, I need to make sure that the control and the treated group are not do not already exhibit different trends prior to the program. I mean, prior to the amendments, which could actually bias the results. This has been checked in every paper in the literature, and I also check it, and the assumption holds. Now going into the results. So for the sake of clarity, I only show you in most of the results the first part of the table. So basically the treated dummies with the interaction with land. But obviously in my regression, I have also the non-interactive terms, but here, because I have not an infinite space on the slides, I only show you what is significant and hence interesting. But of course, it's included in the regression. So you can look at column 3 for every table, because this is where I have all fixed effect and controls. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the result on education, because as I said, it's a result that is largely accepted in the literature. And actually, it only confirmed that my method is consistent with other findings, because I have positive and significant effect in terms of education, which decrease with the age of the woman at the time of the amendments, and which is up to 1 year of additional education compared to the control group. What's interesting though, and it's new compared to the literature, is this long-term effect. So what I have here is that the coefficient born after the reform interacted with land is negative and insignificant. However, when we look at the non-interactive and interacted terms, we have a positive and significant effect. So what does that mean? Well, my hypothesis is that actually the amendments triggered a positive effect in terms of the socially acceptable level of education for these women. So that's why even people that were families that were not directly affected by the HSA or its amendments increased their daughters' education in the treated group, because probably daughters of household owning land went to school longer, and so they also sent their daughters longer. to school. So one comments that I had many times when presenting this paper is that land is correlated to other factors. It can be endogenous. And therefore, I check my results on the whole sample, not taking the interaction, and I also have a positive and significant effect. But when I take the interaction, only the interaction, the interacted terms are positive. So the result still holds without the interaction, but we can see that the effect is mainly on landed households, which is, to me, is suggests that this is actually the effect of the amendments, which are especially targeting land. So now, as I said, my first hypothesis was that yes.
Do you have the number of enrollments before and after the changes?
The number of enrollments? Sorry.
Enrollments in schools or universities.
The number of women that are enrolled.
Yes, the number of women. The enrollments by women.
Yeah, I have the descriptive statistics. Sorry. Go just. Yeah, so that's I have the average. So on average, women have spent 4 years in the education system, and there is a mistake here. And this is the difference between the treated and control. But no, it's true. I don't have a table here about like the specific number in my sample, but I could check later. No, sorry. Sorry, I'm lost in my slides. Here we are. Okay, so yeah, my next, my first hypothesis was that parents would compensate their daughters with education to allow them to have better outcome on the labor markets. So I check again, as I said, the number of days worked the previous year. And here, again, looking at column 3, I have absolutely no significant effect. I'm suggesting that actually, either there are some effects that I'm not aware of, but my main hypothesis is that parents did not send their daughters to school longer to increase their education, their opportunities on the labor market. And actually, looking at the literature on labor force participation of women in India, there are still many factors that prevent women from entering the workforce, such as the social norms, the lack of white-collar jobs, higher competition in education, etc., that prevents women from entering the workforce again, and hence that's why labor force opportunities may not have been the primary concerns of parents when sending their daughters to school longer. And hence I look at my second hypothesis, which is that actually this decision was driven by the willingness to offer their daughters more opportunity on the marriage market. And the first thing that I look at is age at marriage. Why? Because age at marriage is a very important determinant for many things. It's linked to education, but it's also linked to bargaining power in the households, fertility, etc. And here, as opposed to the two first results that I had, I show the second part of the table first. So I'm going to show the table on 2 slides again because I didn't have enough space, but it's the same regression. Here I have the non-interacted terms, and if we look again at the third column, I have a negative and significant effect. So basically, in the treated group, women married earlier. This effect is also true if I take only women that are above 25-year-old to prevent from a sample selection of women that were young, were young at the time of the survey, so obviously married young, and also to make sure that everyone was out of school at this point. And the result still holds. And same if I take a sample of uneducated women, so women with 0 years of education. And this again holds, meaning that this effect is not entirely driven by some sort of educational effect. Now, taking the first part of the table, the interacted terms, here I have a positive and significant effect for 2 of the most treated cohorts and 1 of the partially treated cohorts. So what does it mean? It means that, as I said earlier, most of the whole treated group married younger, but women coming from a household with land were able to counter this effect and to marry a little bit older than their treated counterparts. And again, it holds with only women above 25-year-old and uneducated samples. Before going into the details of the mechanism and why we have this effect on the marriage market, I'd like to talk a bit more about the robustness of the results and the robustness checks that I did. So the first thing I did is I looked at marriage timing for identification. So basically, women who were married before the amendments were not eligible for to obtain the joint property as well. So here I plotted the results for with this identification strategy. What I find for education is the exact same as with using age at the time of the amendment, so a positive and significant effect. The coefficient is close to the one that I showed you earlier. I have no effect for work, and for age at marriage, so I have again the negative and significant effect for the non-interacted coefficient, and positive, but here not significant effects for the interaction. So the sample is lower using this identification, so maybe I lose the precision of the estimation. That's why I don't have a significant effect. More work is needed to understand if this is just a problem of numbers of observation, or this is something else, but at least I have the same, approximately the same magnitude and the same size of effect. I also look at the effect using the first wave of the survey, the Indian Human Development Survey. This is basically the exact same households, just they were interviewed 6 years earlier. So I was not expecting to find different results because it's the same household, just at different points in time, but it was to make sure that the effect that I had was not because of a particular survey year, and especially for work, because I use the number of days worked the previous year. So maybe this year was a specific year, and so this prevents from having this issue. And so here's the first part of the table, but we have the positive effect for education, we have no effect for work, and this positive effect for aged marriage, and the negative effect is in the second part of the table that I didn't show here again for space issue. So as I said earlier, in 2005, the government of India decided to extend the HSA, the amendment of the HSA to all states of India. So here I look at the effect of this 2005 reform, and having the same effect on this reform would strengthen actually the mechanism that I emphasized for the amendments, because I mean that would mean that reproducing the exact same reform I mean, if we have the same effect, it means that it's pretty it's a reproducible effect. So here, because women in 2011 were young, so I can only look at education. I cannot look at work or marriage yet. The effect, I mean, there are not enough women that are affected by the 2005 reform and that are in the labor market and married already. So I only look at education, and I more specifically look at a dummy equal to 1 if the woman ever attended school. treated as a dummy equal to 1 if the woman was 10 at the time of the 2005 reform in a state that did not amended the HACA before 2005. And again, I have this interaction with Len. And here again, I have a positive effect on education, which strengthened the mechanism emphasized here. And as I said earlier, I'm also using two placebo samples, a sample of men and a sample of non-Hindu women, so women in a religious group that are not affected by the amendments. Why? Because as those groups are not affected directly by the amendments, if we see the same effect exactly for them, then it might be that the effect that I emphasize are not really an effect of the amendments, but that something else is going on. Starting by men, I look first at education, and as you can see, there aren't much effects. We have a small effect, a negative effect for the last cohort, which might be an effect due to, again, the sample that is a bit smaller. Or maybe there is a long-term negative effect on men, but I need to think more about it. For now, it still needs to be taken into account. But at least for the younger cohorts, the older cohorts that are affected for women, there is no effect for them. Regarding work, so we have a negative and significant effect, which might be an income effect. As I said earlier, Roy 2015 showed that parents also increased their daughters' dowry following the amendments, which means that those families probably received a larger income, which decreased the labor force participation of the husbands. And for age at marriage, here I have a completely positive effect. However, it's not that surprising because the age at marriage of the groom and the brides are highly correlated. And actually, I might talk a little bit more about it later, but those coefficients are larger for men than women. And actually, the difference between spouses increase following the amendments. So women are marrying older men, which could be due to several things, but which could be due to the fact that those women, being more educated thanks to the amendments, gain more bargaining power in the marriage market and are able to marry older men that might have higher income, better economic situation, etc. Now, looking at non-Hindu women, we have absolutely no effect on education. I have some effect on work that for now are again a bit surprising to me and needs to be I need to do more work on this, but my initial thought was that maybe there is some compensating effect. Those women that are not directly affected got more opportunities on the labor market because other withdrew from it because of the amendment. Well, it's a preliminary hypothesis for now, so I need more work, and if you have suggestions and comments later, don't hesitate. And for age at marriage, I also have some positive effects. And this again might just be spillover effect, social norms regarding the age at marriage that changed for everyone. Now, about the mechanism here, and this is the main contribution to this paper, is to, here I took findings in the literature and I tried to understand how they could go together. Some find education, some find an increase in labor force participation, some marriage market mechanism. And here in my paper, I have all of them, and I try to understand why would parents act in such way, and what's the actual consequences for those daughters. So as I said, I have an increase of education, which confirms the literature. But on labor force participation, I have a contradictory findings, especially compared to Heath and Tan 2020, we find a positive effect. And here, looking at our results and the differences between our results, I found two things. The first thing is that we used two different types of data, and my data tends to take more into account women that are more rural, from less wealthy household, who have less education and are less likely to enter the labor market already. And then, so I looked at different types of women and especially different types of jobs. And what I found is that, yes, in my data, I do have an effect for labor force participation, but only for salary work. Salary work in my data represents only 5% of women, because actually it's more high paying, more formal, and not every woman in India has access to these types of jobs. So what I do is that I nuance a bit the finding of Hicks and Tan. They show that there is an effect on labor force participation that is driven by high-paying jobs. And what I say is that actually, yes, there is a certain effect for labor force participation, but it's only for a very few of women that were maybe more integrated in the labor market already, more likely to have a certain types of jobs, and to enter the labor market. And so they benefited from the amendments in terms of labor market opportunities. But this is not the case for all women. This is not a major effect. For most women, the amendments had no effect on labor force participation, at least in my findings. Therefore, as I said, I looked at marriage market outcomes, and here I had this kind of strange effect of negative, decreasing aged marriage for everyone, but increasing effect for landed household, for women coming from landed household. And here, to explain those results, I use, so again, the work of Royd, who show an increase in dowry following the amendments, and the seminal work on dowry by Anderson 2003, who showed that dowry is both a pre-mortem bequest and a price on the marriage market. And here, the mechanism that I underline is that parents affected by the amendments, so mostly parents with land, were able to increase their daughter's dowry as a compensation, and so as a pre-mortem bequest. But this raised the price for everyone on the marriage market. So this raised the acceptable level of dowry for everyone, which led some parents, and especially the non-landed household, who were not affected that much by the amendments and might not have been that able to increase their daughter's dowry, to marry their daughters younger, because marrying young is an important feature of the marriage market in the context of India. And that's why we have this negative effect for everyone, because of an increase in the price of marriage, but a compensating effect for landed households. Now, I have additional findings that I didn't show here. It's still a bit preliminary, but that shows that actually there is some evidence of better bargaining power and position within the households. For instance, as I said, I found that women marry older men, so maybe that have better economic situation. I also find that they have a better say in their marital decision. And I find that their husbands' fathers have, sorry, it's not hard, there's a mistake here, have more education. Oh no, are more educated, there's no mistake. Sorry. So these are findings that, and this is whole for women coming from landed households. So this is evidence that in addition to dowry, they also gained more power. So they were able to marry older because they had more bargaining on the marriage market, and that's why the rest of the treated group might have been forced to marry younger, and that's why we have this negative effect. So again, talking with and presenting this paper, I had other mechanisms that were some suggested to me, and I think I need to think a lot more about it and to look at evidences, but I wanted to talk about it still. If ever you have comments on this or ideas, I think it's interesting hypothesis to look at, and I will. So I also wanted to talk a bit about it, although for now I have no further evidence that this might be the actual path. So the first is the reverse marriage squeeze hypothesis. So the marriage squeeze hypothesis is that in India, women marry younger than men, and because of the increasing population, there is always more brides than grooms. which means that women tend to increase their age at marriage because when they go into the marriage market, they don't find on the first round, let's say, so they re-enter the market later. But here, following the amendments, as I told you at the beginning, a paper found that there were higher fertility, and especially of girls, which decreased the number of women and decreased the number of women on the marriage market, which might lead men to marry later, so to re-enter the marriage market because they didn't find a bride, and women to marry earlier because there is less competition. So this is something that could also explain this age difference between spouse, as well as the decreasing effect in terms of age at marriage for husband. The others again suggestion that I had is that this might be an educational effect. Again, the effect holds even when I take non-educated women. So I'm not sure yet that it really matter. It's really it could really be this effect, but I need to go more into it. So it's possible that actually the women that have higher dowry and the women that have higher education are not the same, and that's yeah, so the families that have no money for higher dowries increase their daughters' education, and they are the ones that delay marriage compared to the ones who marry older. So there might be an heterogeneous effect, especially in terms of wealth, that I need to go in deeper. And it's also possible that because I have this higher mortality, a higher feticide effect, the girls who survive are better cared for and then get more education. So again, this is a possible mechanism. Now, before concluding, I have a forthcoming work that I really like to develop, but for now it's very preliminary. So I will show you very quickly some results, but it's too preliminary to really discuss it and add it to the main talk. But as you might have seen, the implementation of the amendment is staggered. So the year of implementation of the amendments is not the same in the different states. And so it raised concerns about the validity of the model that I used, the classical model, the two-way fixed effects. And so the aim of this work is to use the work of Callaway and Santana 2020, who takes care of take into account the staggered implementation of difference in difference model. And so for now on, I have the results that I have are consistent with what I talked about. So for instance, for education, I have no trends prior to the amendments, and then a positive effect. But again, I don't want to discuss too much those findings because they are really preliminary, and I need to work a lot more on all of this to make sure that I have the right methodology and everything. And that will be all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. Again, if you have any comments, suggestions, everything is very welcome. And also if you need, if you can also send me an email if you have any other same question, suggestion. I will be really happy to discuss with you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Margaux. Thank you for your presentation. I will open for questions. Anyone? I have a question. It's about one of your tables. When you, the part of robustness, when you present some tables, the first one about marriage, I think I missed what you, yes. I will.
Okay. So yeah, sorry, maybe I went a bit far because it's another identification strategy and I didn't want to go on with the methodology all over again. So maybe I'm sorry, it wasn't really clear. But so women who were married before the amendments were already married when the amendment was passed. were not eligible for the joint property. They were not eligible for the amendments. So I use this as a cutoff. So women who were married before are in the control group, and women who were married after are in the treated group. So basically here, married after the reform is equal to 1 if the woman married after the amendment and if she lives in a state that amended the HAC and is interacted with land. Again, it's the same methodology of a triple interaction with land. And so here, what I was saying is that I have, for education, I have the exact same coefficient. It's very close. I have no effect for work. And here, the only concern is that for age-old marriage, I have this positive but insignificant compared to the other identification strategy that I use, so with age. And I need to work on that, but it's in terms of sign, it's actually similar to the other identification strategy. So I'm not sure. And yes, another difference too is that I don't use age fixed effect, but marriage year fixed effect. So that's
let me see if I understood. Married after the reform, those women can't be affected by the law, the change of the law.
Women married before, yes, they were not affected.
They were not, but the education, it's their educational level.
Yeah, their education.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anyone question? Someone?
If you have more comments, or I mean, so the working paper is online, and you can send me an email. Oh yeah, I see another question. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Emerson raised his hand.
Hi, Margaux. It's a small point, but do you have the data at the level of the individual, at the individual level?
Yeah, it's at the individual level. Yeah, some questions are the household level and some individuals.
You have the information on the states, but not on the cities, the municipalities, or just the states of not the city where
So I have states, and then I have districts, which is a smaller administrative entities, and I have some villages. Not all of them, but some villages.
But you know where the woman lives exactly. Because maybe you could because you had a fixed effect for states, but maybe you could. I'm thinking that maybe the state is not that homogeneous, in the sense that if you try to add more fixed effect, maybe you will get something extra about the region and then control for that. So it's a small point. I know that you have already add a fixed effect to try to control for anything that is observable, but maybe if you have the data at higher level of disaggregation, maybe you could add that as well, and then see if the things continues to be the same. But it's a small point, just to ask. And
yeah, so it's a very good point. I don't remember trying at a higher level. I followed the literature, which mainly used state fixed effect. But it's true that, yeah, I might be missing some information, some heterogeneity within the states. So
I don't know anything about India, but here in Brazil, it's completely different. Even if you live in one neighborhood in one city, and the same city, two different neighborhoods, people are completely different. Just.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not. Overall, from what I wrote, the states are pretty homogeneous. I mean, the states are different among them, but within a state, it's a bit homogeneous. But I'll check it too, because I might be missing something. Yeah, thank you. Good comments. Thanks.
And Margaux, Giovanna here. I actually have a comment. Do you know Sofia Amaral? Because I think that she has a paper using this law in India also, but she analyzed actually the impact on the violence against women, and she used exactly this law. Sofia Amaral. I can send you the paper.
Yeah, that would be great, because no, I don't recall. I mean, the name. I don't recall reading her work.
Like I will send in the chat. And
what exactly is she studying? Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, it's actually the impact of this inheritance law in India, but on violence against women.
Okay, yeah,
instead of labor market. Yeah, I seen the chat.
Okay, yeah. I'm not aware of the work, so I've seen some work on violence. It's mixed, the findings are mixed, but I will also check her work. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for sending the paper to and look at it.
And thank you for the presentation. It was really, really great.
Thanks, thank you.
Margaux? Okay.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to check again. I missed a little about the results for men. Have you
for men? Yeah.
For men, just.
So yeah, what I was saying is that in terms of education, we don't see much effect. Instead, maybe on the long term, which is something that I will explore. There might be some long-term negative effect on boys because girls get more education. So I'll check it.
The men is the opposite. No.
Sorry?
No. Go ahead, please. Just thinking loud.
Yeah, for work, I was thinking more of an income effect because of the increase in dowry. So does husband get more dowry from marriage and might then decrease their labor force participation. And for aged marriage, yeah, I find a larger difference in terms of age. So women affected by the amendments marry later, and two, I mean, from landed household, they marry a bit later, and to men that are older too. So.
And you did it just to like a robustness check? Yes.
Yeah, for now.
And
sorry. Okay.
And it was a good result, like it for you, right? Like.
Yeah. I think.
Yes.
It shows.
And with the non-Hindu women as well, like you have a good robustness check.
Yeah, it's just
yes.
For aged marriage, the effect for non-Hindu women is a bit more surprising. For non-Hindu women, I have more surprising results. I wanted to show it because I'm still thinking.
Yes, I like it very much. This robustness exercises that you've made.
Yeah,
with men and non-Hindu women. I thought it was really interesting.
Thanks. I also thought it was interesting, so I put it, but it also raises all the questions. So other possible.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
What's the impact of the reform to men and to the non-Hindus women, and you can like think about another question, another exercise, and another impact.
I was expecting to find no results at all because they were not non-affected groups. When I had the results, I was worrying a bit more about my methodology. I was thinking maybe there is something I missed, but looking deeper into from what I understood now, it might be just effect of the amendments, but on non-affected groups that are not necessarily unvalidating the methodology or the effect on treated women, but that might be, for instance, the results on aged marriage for men is actually an interesting result because it shows that actually the marriage market was really changed by the amendments. And of course, marriage market, it involves many many people, I mean, men and women. So if something changed for women, then obviously, I mean, it can be, it's not surprising that some things also change for men. But yeah, it raises a lot of new questions, and probably
Yes.
I have work to do to really understand deeper all the effect for everyone.
And with the question or the comments of Giovanna, I was thinking about the reform you study, your analysis is about like before marriage, and I'm thinking of another analysis is about after marriage regarding the bargain power with the domestic violence, about the impact of this reform in intra-household allocation and the bargain power of the couple and the family, you know, like there's another area completely different, but it may be interesting also. Really great study, presentation, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the comments to go further. I think yes, I think someone else had the question. No.
No. Okay. A minute. Okay.
Cynthia, do you have a question? No.
No, I just clapped.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have more questions later, don't hesitate to write me an email. I answer pretty quick, usually.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you, Margaux.
Thank you for letting me present again.
Okay. So I want to tell you that next webinar will receive Marina Diaz. She's from the University of California in Berkeley. She will present her work about racial inequalities in the labor market, the role of entrepreneurship. And I'd like to thank Margaux and see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jen. Bye, thanks.
Bye-bye.